Good afternoon. Welcome to the Race, Justice, Equity Series webinar. Today's conversation is on race, anti-racism, and teaching, a conversation with educators of color. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter School Association. Race is complicated. Right? It's a social construct. It's how we segregate and categorize people. It's been a key signifier of power and powerlessness, of privilege and oppression, of have and have-nots. At the same time, it's a signifier of community, of shared culture, of beauty, of comfort, of home, and safe harbor. However, as much as it is a social construct and not in any real way that can be confirmed or validated by physical science, race is absolutely real in its consequences. How we think of race, perceive race, and identify the members of racial groups, and more importantly, the privileges or lack thereof of that assigned membership, informs how we treat people. Race permeates life in this country even when we are not conscious of its effects. It is certainly true when it comes to the education system, as we all know. In education, race matters. Any measure of performance of students, of parents, of schools, of teachers, of school leaders will get scrutinized on the basis of race. Teachers are on the front line of that system that is at once charged with helping to solve America's race problem and identified as a stubborn standard bearer of the status quo of racial inequity. Racism is a barrier to education equity, plain and simple. So how do we fight racial injustice and inequity? Something that we try to examine, hopefully talk about here on Race, Justice, and Equity webinar series. So let's talk to educators about race and anti-racism. With us today are educators from Brooklyn up to Buffalo, to talk about their pedagogy, their experiences as educators of color, and how to achieve equity in education. Educators taking part in this conversation today include Stefan Guidry. I said I wasn't going to go through everyone's name, and here I am already doing this. So I'm not going to take up all this time introducing everyone. We're going to jump right to the panel and the questions. And what I will ask of all the panelists who are here today is, the first time you speak, please introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself and your background. And we're going to start, we're going to jump in. The first question here really it's about the Black Lives Matter movement being the central catalyst in terms of movements that are focused, that have many of us and has the country, and including in parts of the world even, focused on anti-racism right now. Black Lives Matter sparked with renewed focus and energy following the murder of George Floyd and others, and that spawned what I'm going to call, and what some others called, Black Spring in America. And so, Tyreek and Dr. Jones, you have key roles in a group, Educators for Justice. And tell us a little bit about yourselves and then about the group. How did it get started and its mission, and what's next for the group?
Thank you so much, Ms. Bennett. I am grateful. My name is Tyreek Lang, educator, the founder, and one of the co-founders and the president and CEO of Educators for Justice. And I'm also an 8th grade ELA teacher at a charter school in Bedford-Stuyvesant, New York. And one of the things that started this movement was we had an opportunity to have a day off for Mental Health Day when all the situation with George Floyd was happening and so much social unrest. And I called my co-partner, my co-advisor. Her name is Jocelyn Pena. She's also a co-founder of the movement. And we were speaking and just talking. And one thing led to us talking about how we should just do a march. And to kind of just get teachers and kind of get a call to action for educators to come out together and stand together in solidarity, but also to advocate for our students in such a trying time. And it's crazy with so much happening and so much social unrest. And the moment we put the call out for the march and we've seen so many educators just rally behind us, we immediately started to realize that, hey, this is not just a moment in time, but this is really going to be a movement. And so we decided to start Educators for Justice, 5 teachers from Bedford-Stuyvesant, from Excellence Boys Middle Academy, myself, Jermaine Isaac, who's our Director of Operations, Davina McCabe, who is my Executive Vice President, Jocelyn Pena, our Executive Administrator, and Amber Jazz Petrus, who's one of the co-founders. And so we decided to come together and we did this march. And after the march was over, we kept hearing people ask, well, what's next? And we didn't want to just be something that we just marched and then no action afterward, but we wanted to follow through with action. And we wanted to make actionable steps and advocate on behalf of teachers, on behalf of students, on behalf of parents. And so after that, we did the march. We started doing different conversations, having town halls, and within 2 months now, we've seen tremendous growth within our team. We have a team of 13 educators spanning from Sacramento, California, all the way to London, England. And so it's 13 of us who are on the ground working extremely hard to bring awareness to the injustices in education and start finding actionable steps to actually solve them. So we're talking about the disproportionate behavioral management policies, disciplinary policies. We're talking about lack of Black curriculum in schools. And we're also talking about the lack of curriculum designers who are people of color in our schools. And so we're bringing attention to this, but we're also having conversations to find solutions and to find people who are actually doing the work as well, and then to also bring them to our platform. So it's been a beautiful thing. And Dr. Angel Jones, she's our one of our senior content developers, and she just joined our team, but she's definitely been doing a tremendous amount of work on her own in education, which is one of the reasons we wanted to partner with her and brought her on board to the organization because of her tremendous background and her passion for the work. So I'll give her opportunity to share about her background.
Thanks, Tyreek. I am Angel Jones. I am a professor in the higher education administration program at George Washington University. And before higher ed, I was a high school teacher and middle and high school counselor. I love our movement just because I'm passionate, not just about teaching students, but also teaching educators. So I teach in the higher ed program, and I also teach other school counselors. So one, I want to empower teachers to teach Black and brown students, but I also want to be able to empower Black and brown teachers, right? Because we struggle, we have a lot of the same issues in terms of the racism that we deal with. So I want to be able to educate, empower, and encourage as many teachers as I can so that they can therefore encourage our students. Are you on mute? I see your lips moving, but I don't hear you.
I am on mute. Thank you. So thank you and welcome. I want to move now to Alicia and Stefan. You're teachers, artists, activists. Please share a little bit about your background and your work teaching during this time of COVID quarantine and Black Spring. You're muted, Alicia. Alicia and Stefan, you're muted.
I think that's like the coined phrase of the last 5 to 6 months. Are you on mute? Sorry, I'm on mute. So hi, I'm Alicia McNeil. I am an educator of 13 years. I have taught both elementary, middle, and high school. Currently, I am teaching 12th graders ELA and AP Lang. I've run the gamut in education from administrator to coach to classroom teacher over the past 13 years. And I work at the Charter High School for Law and Social Justice. Mr. Goodry. You're on mute.
I keep forgetting that. Sorry. Hopefully this does not persist. Hi, my name is Stefan Guidry. I also work at the Charter High School for Law and Social Justice. I teach junior English, AP Literature, and I'm also the English department chair. So my career has always been in education, and I've usually worked in, I guess what most people would consider urban areas. So I've taught everything from preschool all the way to high school, but now I've currently seen that my passion is needed, and it truly has changed me by teaching high school education. Just to see like the path of how young people, specifically teenagers, are becoming more, I don't want to say the word radicalized, but they're becoming more aware of their surroundings and their effect on the world, whether it's through social media, from us making like light of TikTok videos, but they took TikTok and made it something to use for protests. To Tyreek and Dr. Jones's to their work. Both Alicia, myself, and some other teachers did go to one of their protests that went through Brooklyn. And so we are very passionate about making sure that Black and Brown educators, as well as students, get a more equitable education. When it comes to myself and Alicia, like, she needs to toot her own horn. She's an amazing writer. Please check out aliciaamber.com. Great writings, as it talks about being a Black woman in this world, being a Black mother. And if people are not like truly understanding their history, Black women are behind every movement, period. End of statement. I could write a whole book on just saying that. Black women are behind every movement, period. Like, that's enough. It doesn't matter which movement you want to choose. It doesn't matter which rights you want to talk about. Black women were behind it, period. And that goes for all movements. Voting rights, women's rights, gay rights. We could continue to go on. But I'm ready to continue in John Lewis's like passing of making some good trouble in education now. And I hope that's what we're all here to do today with this panel.
I'm here for it. Let's make some trouble. And I will accept that mantle of starting movements. I will, on behalf of the women who came before me and those who will come after me, yes, we accept. Am I right? Accept. Thank you. And I want to just take a moment and just ask Alicia, Stefan called you out now, so you have to drop in the chat your that URL for the website.
Yes,
all right. Okay, we're going to move now to Arturo and Bridget. Please tell us about yourselves. Arturo, we'll start with you, and then Bridget, tell us about yourselves. And like I said, Arturo, we'll start with you.
All right. You guys can hear me, right? All right. Thank you, Yomika, for having me here. So I'm a product of the South Bronx. Throughout my years of education, I looked at the teachers and I realized that there weren't like too many teachers that looked like myself or my friends. And so when the opportunity came, I decided to become a teacher. I currently teach AP Stats and Stats for Mesa Charter High School located in Bushwick. But before then, I taught middle school and high school math in the Bronx, Harlem, East New York, Bushwick, and I've had the opportunity to teach for 2 years in China. One thing that I'm very proud of is I've also participated in something called NYC Men Teach to try to recruit more male teachers of color into the workforce. And that's something that I'm passionately interested in. And I look forward to learning more about you all.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bridget Jackson. I'm currently a training specialist at Enterprise Charter in Buffalo, New York, and I'm also a business owner of Lady B Tutoring. I've been in education for 15 years. I know we were talking about adding it up. I started in 2005, so I could do the math real quick. Basically, I did not go to school to be a teacher. I was actually working for county government, and my degree is in math. And I had a friend who was already a kindergartner teacher, and she said, well, why don't you just be a math teacher? We need a lot of Black and brown faces. And so that's like 15 years later. No matter how many times I tried to get away from it, I guess it became a higher calling. And to tell you the truth, I found myself more passionate about it than people with the 30,000 degrees behind their names. It takes a lot of heart to work with kids of all different types of backgrounds and kids who struggle, kids who excel, because, I think sometimes we make it synonymous that kids of color struggle. We have kids who excel, and we have to be able to reach all of them from the bottom to the top. And so I thank you, Yomika, for having me here today.
All right, great, thank you. All right, so I want to introduce, I'm going to introduce now Brother Rafiq. And I'm going to ask you this question. You founded Ember Charter School. Part of the school's mission, according to your website, is mindfulness, trauma-informed, culturally responsive. Please tell us a little bit about your background, about Ember, its mission, and its focus. And welcome.
Thank you, good sisters. It's an honor to be here, and always an honor to be in partnership with you. First, I want to just co-sign what Brother Stefan said earlier. My My older sister, who's really a North Star in my life, she wrote a book called A Nation Can Rise No Higher Than Its Women. And, you know, I've always known that to be true. And just being here with these amazing sisters is just kind of reconfirming that for me. So in many ways, we started Ember really, to speak in pandemic terms, to kind of be the vaccine for white supremacy, to be the vaccine for institutional racism, right? Vaccine isn't a cure, right? It helps build your system up to resist the onslaught of the virus. And in a lot of ways, you know, our people for the last several centuries have been under this enormous pressure, infected with this idea that we are somehow less than, we are somehow not equivalent to, we are not somehow great. And so to me, it wasn't, you know, I was raised in a community in Philadelphia. I was raised in the nation, the original Nation of Islam, where they were fully committed to taking on the reins of our own future and trying to empower us as much as we could. For all the struggles and challenges that the nation had, what landed in my DNA was that we need to do for self. We need to build our own institutions, our own enterprises. We ask no one for permission about how we're going to lead and provide the solutions to our community. So Ember, strip away everything else. We have to call it a school because legally that's how we get funded. But ultimately, we like to talk about ourselves as the 21st century Underground Railroad. That is our purpose. We are trying to empower people to lead their own way to freedom, and whatever it takes to live in that liberated way for people who are oppressed, that's what our enterprise is designed to do. We could talk about STEM, we could talk about critical thinking, we could talk about trauma-informed instruction, but if it's not empowering and moving us towards liberation, if it's not vaccinating us and making us resilient to fight white supremacy and institutionalized racism, then we're not doing it. And so that's really our focus, and that's really kind of at the core of our purpose.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us here today. So I want to introduce now, or turn to Ashar Baker. Ashar, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I am going to just ask you to introduce yourself, and that's going to lead to my introduction of the next person. So Ashar,
Sure.
welcome. Just let everybody know what you do, those of us who might be new.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashara Baker. I work with the New York Charter Schools Association, and I am the Community Engagement Manager. I've had the privilege of working with some of the upstate charter schools, Rochester, Buffalo. So I've met with quite a few school leaders. I have founded the newest New York Charter Parent Council that we have statewide. So I'm convening parents across the state. We're equipping them, we're connecting, and we're just going to do the good work of advocacy throughout the state for the charter sector. So thank you.
Thank you. And now, so I did the first webinar, the Race, Justice, and Equity series. At the end of that, or somewhere along the line, I said, you know, reach out to me if you want to be a part of this effort, if you have ideas for what we need to do and what we need to talk about and the work of race, justice, and equity. And Natasha Terry Perez reached out to me and said, I know some folks, I want to be a part of this. And we had a conversation, and Natasha, you said something to me that I would like you to repeat now. And you are, give us your title. You're the senior, and I'm not going to get it right now, but give us your title. And you are an educator, and tell me what you said about how and why you're an educator. And I said, okay, all right, let's see this. All right. So welcome, Natasha, and tell them what you told me.
So good afternoon, everyone. I am an educator. Now, I've been an educator for 15 years, and I'm an educator because I'm a mom. I'm a parent. So as a parent, I'll be my child's first and forever educator. So I will forever be an educator. And I also started a mentoring organization over a decade ago. I had a mentoring organization in East New York for young Black girls of color at a school in my neighborhood. So I worked with them for many years, and I educated them and opened them up and gave them opportunities to see other women and other people of color doing great things that came from Brooklyn and from New York. So they felt like they were able to do anything because they had the exposure. So as a mentor, as a mommy, I'm a first and forever educator.
Thank you. All right,
And oh,
welcome
I'm sorry.
everyone. So we're going to get into now.
No, and I forgot to mention that I work for Uncommon. I forgot to mention I work for Uncommon Schools. I am the Senior Associate Director of Community Engagement.
Right. That's right. All right, great. We now let's move to the question of the day. Let's talk about race as teachers of color, Black, Latino. According to a couple of published reports, we know the statistics here. Teachers of color represent about 20% of teachers in New York State. The student population in charters in particular is almost a mirror image of that. So it's that 80% or more are students of color. Does that matter, right? We know Black lives matter, right? We understand, right? We've all affirmed that. Do Black and Latino teachers matter? And Arturo, I'm going to start with you because you started to go on to that topic when you introduced yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely. Black and Latino teachers do matter. Black and brown teachers do matter. I think that the kids need to see mentors who look like them, you know. And from my personal experience, I've always been one of the few Latino teachers, and each school that I've worked for. Yeah, we live in a multicultural society, right? So yeah, to me, it's still confusing as to why our teachers don't match demographics of who we teach. And if there's currently a shortage of teachers of color, I wonder if this is because students can envision that in themselves. Representation matters. So yeah, I do believe so.
So that's interesting that students can't, so that we aren't growing teachers in the classroom because the teachers don't see enough of teachers of color. Students don't see enough teachers of color to think, to dream, to consider becoming a teacher themselves. That's very interesting.
I think
anyone else on that?
I'm sorry. I think we also have to examine Black and Latino children's educational experience that causes them to often say, no, this is not what I want to do, right? So when I was in high school, I went to a predominantly white high school. I didn't particularly like school. I never had a teacher who looked like me until I got to college, until I went to my HBCU, Virginia University, right? So what I do know about my experience is that it was not a good one. I had all white teachers. Only one teacher took an interest in me and realized that I was bright. Most of my friends were in the lower level classes, not necessarily because they were not intelligent, but because of some presumed incompetence about them. So I was in AP and honors classes alone, right? I was the only Black kid. Whenever they asked the question about slavery, everybody turned around and looked at Alicia, and it was very uncomfortable. Right? It was very uncomfortable for me. And even in high school, my one mentor teacher in my junior year said, you're really good at showing kids how to do things in a way that I can't. You should be a teacher. And I kind of laughed it off because I didn't see that in my classroom. Granted, my mother's a teacher. I come from a family of teachers, but that still even didn't matter. It mattered that I did not have interaction with teachers of color, with Black and Latino teachers on a daily basis. So I wasn't interested. When I speak to many Black and Latino men and I say, hey, you would be great, right? Statistics show that when Black and Latino men particularly teach children who look like them, graduation rates go up, right? College acceptance rates go up. It's nothing but positive when children are taught by people who look like them, but it's not happening often because we've experienced a certain level of trauma under the system of white supremacy within the educational system, right? So I truly don't think of there's a shortage. I think that, there are a lot of teachers even who experience such racism that they want to leave. Right? I've spoken to many educators throughout the years, and a lot of them have left because they're, experiencing the same racism and prejudice that, the children are experiencing, right? So we definitely have to get
I'm going to ask
to the root.
And so I'm going to ask you to unpack that a little bit. Right, I'm not in the classroom. There may be some other people on this call and or the webinar, and some people will see this in the future. Will say, or won't be in classroom. What happens in the schools? You said that sort of they experience racism, teachers experience racism, and they want to leave. Tell us what's up.
So I was going to jump in anyway, just because Alicia said something that her and I talk about a lot, which is like the trauma of teachers that no one ever wants to talk about. And there have been a lot of social media posts lately that are starting to, sometimes they're jokes, and other times it's just like a slice of life of what it means to be a teacher. That like we are given this brunt of work that we're supposed to educate students, but at the same time, we become social workers. We become their best friend. We become their nutritionist. We become their life coach. We become their secret holders, people that they can just bounce ideas off of. We become the person telling you, oh, wow, you came out to me. That's totally okay. I won't share that with anyone else. But what is that like to be with you? And all of that has nothing to do with me telling you how to write a correct sentence to make a subject-verb agreement happen in my classroom. But all those things are still happening in classrooms. Or there are teachers, whether they are co-teachers or IEP or this or none of that matters, is that teachers are these dynamic, people think that we're magic, but we're not. We're human, just like everyone else. We have families. We are fathers, mothers, sons. And there seems to be this idea at times that people think we're superhuman, so then deadlines are shifted to be faster. And so then teachers are rushing to try and get them done. Or the amount of results that I may have done last year, oh, you can top that next year. Or our numbers are important. And then we lose sight of what education truly is. That as Brother Rafiq had said, that it's about this empowerment piece to liberate those. And I think that at times, the reason we are feeling this trauma or what is actually happening in the classroom is that there is the weight of what people are expecting us to do, that like school becomes this product. Education becomes a product. How many high scores can you get for this school? Our school looks so good because of our graduation rate or our AP program or this or that or what other thing that I can add on my resume that I've done. And there are some teachers that are, I believe, like us, that are like, that's great, that's awesome. But for me in my classroom, what is truly transformative is when I take literature from authors that are Black and brown and different and other than those that are considered classic and just perpetuate white supremacy and non-people of color, and not perpetuating those stories. I think it's so powerful to show students that they are their writers too, that writers look just like them, that their stories matter, that somebody from the Bronx wrote great literature, someone from Brooklyn wrote great literature, and it should be considered a classic or poetry. These things in my English class seem minute, but then they spring up, and I hope to God that some of my students, who I know are singer-songwriters, some of my students want to become lawyers. Some of my students do want to come back and become educators because they got to be introduced to people like myself and Alicia that are showing them that education is more than, I hate to say it like this, Black and white. There's a much bigger story right there. And I say it's more than Black and white because we need to realize that Latino writers are out there, men, women, and other genders. Their writers, their stories need to be out there. If education is truly liberation, then we shouldn't be afraid of telling everyone's story. Because when everyone's story is in the room, then we empower students to then themselves deal with it. I again refer back to Rafiq saying, like, throw out all the critical thinking, subject verb agreement, all of that stuff. If I empower you to know what the world is like and how to truly see yourself and dream a dream and then actualize it, then you're automatically going to want to graduate. You're automatically going to start to realize that I can own a business. I can have a doctorate. I can be the next president or lawmaker, changing a law. I can vote. You now have the power rather than just being told that things are happening to you and that that's your narrative. And I think that is what truly happens in my classroom, but it's also what I fight against. That the narrative is always happening to people of color and that we're not the ones writing the story. No, we are in charge of our stories if we empower our young people to know that they can take the pen and they can rewrite their own history.
And I think that's a part of the trauma. I'm sorry. A part of the trauma is also that we, I've had to confront the fact, and we spoke about this before, where I'm a part of this racist system, right? As educators, we just are, because the educational system is inherently racist. The educational system is an upholder of white supremacy, or these ideals of white supremacy, right? So even to start to dispel, and this is my opinion solely, often prison to pipeline behavior that you see in charter schools, right? They're not telling the kids on the Upper East Side to walk in a straight line on the tape, right? They're not telling the kids on the Upper East Side to cross their hands and don't unclasp them or you have a demerit, right? All of these things that are upholding systems of white supremacy, upholding the school to prison pipeline, those are things that we have to change within the classroom. Those are things that we have to change within the building. And the trauma comes when we fight against that, and we are called, the troublemakers. We are called, oh, like there she goes again, speaking up, and there she goes again having a problem with things. When in all actuality, it's I've infiltrated the system, and I'm changing the system from the inside out, because that's how currently we do have to do it. We have to dismantle the system entirely, and you cannot do that unless you're in the room, in my opinion.
That's why you got to come to Ember. That's all I'm going to say about that.
And to kind of piggyback off of what Stefan and Alicia are saying, to talk about that trauma as a person of color, I didn't have a traditional background in teaching, didn't go to school for it. So I call it baptism by fire. And so they put me in the classroom. I literally had a Caucasian teacher come to me and say, oh, they're putting you in a class with those kids. And that, to me, that's a microaggression. You had the gall to say that to me, which is off-putting. So I had to take a different approach, because they gave me a 9th grade class. I had kids who were almost 20 years old, about to age out of the system. They had been repeating algebra for 1, 2, 3 times. So I can't do traditional approaches. I have to throw that out the window and find a totally new creative approach. So where the trauma comes in is I'm doing things that are non-traditional, and I'm being, as a teacher, graded and evaluated harshly for doing things out of the box that are working. So when you come in my room, you're going to hear music being played. You're going to see me giving my kids multiple options to show me that they understand and have mastered the same concept. Maybe it doesn't look like a worksheet to you, which is traditional, but maybe it's an art project that shows me they understand how to do X + 4 = 7. Yeah. So that was where my trauma came in, because I'm like, okay, I'm trying to do what's right for the kids. This is working, but I'm being penalized for doing what's working. So please tell me what you want me to do, because now I'm confused and I'm ready to quit actually today, because I just got cussed out, but I'm also dealing with you on my back about this. But you don't give me credit that I grew your 67% proficient to 89 in 10 months. So the trauma of that is just, you lose for losing. But you do win with the kids, and that's what kept me going forward with it. And so it's the back end. It's how we're dealt with harshly. It's how we're not given room to grow. And when I will look at the honors classes, those teachers weren't doing anything extra special for those kids. There was nothing fantastic. It was worksheet, lesson, worksheet. So I think those things also contribute to why people of color don't want to enter into the classroom.
Lack of room to grow, we should put a pin in that, because we can get into that later.
Yeah. Well, and can I just build on that? Alicia said something earlier that talked about the experience of the experiences that kids have, especially kids of color have in the classroom. And that plays a part into them wanting to become a teacher one day, or if not, right? And so I don't just work at a charter school, but I was educated in the public school system while I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up right in Brooklyn, East New York. Went to schools there. And then I went to Thomas Jefferson High School for a season. And then after that, I was transferred to Williamsburg Charter High School, where I was part of the first graduating class of this particular high school. And so literally we were told we're the test dummies. They're trying new things out on us as kids, and it was great. It was good experiences, but it was also really traumatic because you had so many things that you were faced with. And I'm a kid coming all the way from Eastern New York, traveling to Williamsburg every morning to get to school by 7:30. And that's an hour and maybe an hour and a half commute from where I live at. And here I am, if I'm late after a certain amount of times, then I'm now given detention. And I have to stay in school from 7:30 to 4:09, and then an hour after that. And then I have to travel home and then get homework done. So I'm being penalized for my long commute because in a sense, the opportunities that school did give us, my mom felt that she wanted me to go there in comparison to Thomas Jefferson High School. And so these are just situations that happen and experiences that kind of made me go, I don't want to deal with this. And why I didn't want to go into teaching directly after I graduated college. However, the opportunities do present themselves when you enter into a classroom especially as a Black man, and you see the relationships you're able to build with the kids. And then other teachers are kind of confused, like, wow, how do you have management down in 3 or 4 months of the job? I'm like, because I understand them. I know. And one of the greatest compliments one of my students gave me my second year was, Mr. Lang, you really understand how our minds work. And I said, yeah, I do. So being able to connect with them and talk with them, and then even hear kids who, gave me so many problems reach out to me like, you was one of my favorite teachers. I'm like, really? However, it's the experience that you build in the classroom is what's needed in order to empower kids. It's not the measure of their worth shouldn't be found in a data point. The measure of our work as teachers shouldn't be found in a data point, right? We're looking at them and saying, well, they passed their state exams. However, they're going to get to high school and they're going to probably pass their regents, but then they get to college and they're lost because the social, emotional skills that were needed were not developed because they were in class working on math, science, history, writing, and reading, and then maybe 35 minutes of gym, which gets taken away if they don't do their work in any other classes, no recess, and that's all that's focused on, the number, the data, and then they get to college and they don't know how to connect or communicate with people because they've been in this system. And so just hearing, I can say this, I believe that there's been a mass convincing of Black and brown educators that the way some of the charter schools or some of the TLAC or some of the other forms of education is being produced is what's needed for kids of color. There's been a mass convincing, like we've been convinced like they have to be educated like this in order for them to learn. And then there's so many moments where I've sat in my class and I'm up there teaching and I'm just like, I do not remember learning like this. And I turned out pretty damn well. And like, what do we do with that? And so you speak up and you're told, well, this is TLAC is the way we go. This is what it is. You're told, well, this system works. And it's like, but it's not it's not helping them. These kids, they hate it here. They do. And you can ask your educators how they feel, and 85% of the educators say they hate it here. And you ask your administrators, how do you feel in your job? It's okay. Can't wait to get home. And then you ask the parents, how do you feel about the school system? I'm just tired of being called every single day that my kid has his head down in class. And so the parents don't like it, the kids don't like it, the teachers don't like it, and the administrators for some reason keep pushing something they in their hearts don't believe in. So here we have this dilemma, and why are we refusing to change it? That's the question.
So let me ask a question. I see on my screen a number of educators. You're all in the classroom. What works? What do you and I'm gonna kind of blend this with what we're seeing right now and just go right now we're in the COVID crisis, right? The pandemic. I used to work in government, and there was this. We used to say maybe a little bit with gallows humor, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? We are in a crisis now. Nothing good about it. But we are in a crisis. And one of those things that crisis is doing, it is affecting school. right? And as we go through this, I see as much as there is heartbreak and there is terrible things, and if we could all go back, to last November and avoid this altogether, we would, but we cannot. But there's an opportunity now that if we are changing the way that we do school, right? We are thinking about school in ways we have never thought before, on a wholesale scale across the state and across the country. Things will we're talking about reopening now. Things will come back. They should not come back status quo. We should emerge better. And shame on us if we don't, in terms of, and I'm talking about now about outcomes for students of color, experiences for students of color, getting our students right into the pipeline to become teachers, to dream the way you said, Stephon Guidry, to understand their power and place in the world, as you said, Brother Rafiq. How do we do that? What do we need to do? Or what should we be thinking about, and how we could change the way we do school for the better?
I want to invite everybody here to start your own school. If there's one thing that I know to be true about charters, that it is a mechanism for us to be self-determined. No one at Ember does any of the things that you all are describing, because this is a school that me and my brothers and sisters started, that we came together in my community, that we started together. And we start with every question, and we start every action and decision with every question. Does this lead to liberation and empowerment? And to what extent does it further that enterprise? And if it doesn't do that, we don't do it. And so and I'm not saying, look, if you didn't have the experiences, and perhaps you might replicate. And I think that is something that certainly happens to our people, that sometimes we think that something might be good for our people. We've seen it, quote unquote, work, and we replicate oppressive tactics and oppressive strategies that ultimately don't work for our people. But I want to invite everybody here, everybody listening. I'm one of the co-founders of an organization called the Black Latinx Asian Charter Collaborative, and we are focused on growing more of us. And so I want to invite all of us to take the control to start to build our own institutions and enterprises. But in terms of what works, I also want to invite you to be disruptors and activists and agitators in the organizations where you are, right? If all the Black people and brown people threatened to divest, if they didn't change the policies and procedures, I guarantee you would see some change. And so I want to encourage you to make use of those tools and mechanisms too, because our kids are there. And so I'm certainly not saying that our people should not be a part of these other institutions that are white-led institutions. We need to be there. We need to be there to raise our voices. And I do think that comes with some sacrifice. I think it does come with us putting our hearts and our souls on the line, and it is hard and it is difficult, but it's nothing that our ancestors did not do and bear and get through so that we can be here on this webinar, like talking about the opportunities and pushing forward kind of what comes next. So I just wanted to kind of offer that. Certainly I want to invite us to consider our trauma-informed practices, how we do everything that in your hearts and your instinct that is right, that we meet our students where they are in terms of what they are struggling with. They can get to the mathematical, computational facts and skills. That's going to come. They need that to navigate this world. But if they don't know who they are, they can't heal who they've been told they are to become who they truly are meant to be, then nothing that we give them is really going to matter. No facts that we try to demand that they memorize is going to matter. So I just want to invite us also to those two twin ideas and initiatives.
Rafiq, I would like to also echo onto that and say, as parents, don't leave us out of the equation. We're your co-teachers. We have your back as teachers. We know what you go through every day. We see you, we hear you, we feel you. Don't think just because a parent lives in Nitro in a shelter, she's not gonna come fight for her baby. We're gonna be the fiercest advocates you will ever want to see. Enlist us. We're here for you. We got your back. You can't do it alone. We're here and we care more than anything about our babies because they're ours, right? So tell us what's going on. Tell us how we can help, because we don't see and know a lot of things that are going on in the schools. But if we did, we could help. And when we do, we try to help. You know, I'm a parent advocate. I teach all parents how to advocate. And I get the calls and I get the complaints and I help our parents to advocate. And I've had to advocate too on behalf of some things. But now it's a time more than any other time for us to do it together. You can't go and be silo. Get that other teacher. Get the other people that are experiencing the same thing. And like Rafiq said, if y'all come together and say, if y'all don't change X, Y, Z, it's going to be a problem. You know, and employ your white teachers too, because they're marching with us too. They're right there by your side, you know, so they get it. And they're the same ones that say and don't agree with a lot of the things that are going on. Employ everyone to be on your side. Parents, other teachers, it doesn't matter what color they are. Do it together and do it in a unified way. And we'll be able to break down and dismantle all of this stuff. We can do it, we gotta do it, but let's do it together, because you know, they always try to divide and conquer and separate us. Don't let them separate us anymore. Let's get in here, let's fight for our babies, and let's be the change we wanna see, and just make it happen. We can do it, because where are they gonna be without us? If you walk out, if all of the teachers that don't like it walk out, what's gonna happen to the school? If all the parents say, you know what, if you don't change this, we're not coming back. You know, so let's figure out what it is that needs to change, and don't give up and don't stop until you see that change, because our babies are brilliant and our babies could do whatever they're given the opportunity to do. You know, if it feels oppressive, if it don't feel right, it makes you cringe, then it maybe doesn't need to be there. It maybe needs to change, and make the change. Just do it. Now is the time. We can't go back, like Yomika said, to the status quo. We can't do it.
And
Can
I just quickly just say to Natasha, you hit the nail right on the head. And I think connecting, like you said, but even our kids are brilliant. And they as well, I think teachers, students, and parents have an ability to partner together. And I don't even leave it out administrators, because there are some administrators who are on the side, have the thinking to be progressive, and they're in spaces where they're being silenced, or they feel like their voice has no power in some institutions. And so if we actually do come together to begin to push and put pressure on those that are in positions of leadership that do control the policies and the things that are being done in schools, and how, because you can change the practices in your classroom or even your school, but then in a sense your job can, you're graded according to your job by or observed by different principals or different teachers, and they might not agree with it. I think if we started changing how people are observed and instead of changing the policies and the procedures within our schools, we'll see a huge change. We'll see a huge difference in how our kids are actually taught. And I want to say this, because our kids have such a power to be advocates for themselves. If we support them, if we empower them to use their voices, which they already are, and not penalize them for using their voices and calling out things, then we'll have a different generation that will grow up. And I'll say this from the bottom of my heart, and this is in all sincerity. I think 20 years, maybe 15 years from now, there are going to be several charter school networks that will have to issue statements of apology for how they educated Black and brown students for the last 20 years. And like Alicia said, we're part of that system. And if we're in it and we want to change it from the inside out, I think we have some work to do. But like I said, it starts now. We had a conversation with one of Governor Cuomo's representatives, and he said, what do educators want? And we said, well, we started listing some things and we put some things out, but a lot of people are in positions where they're asked, what do they want? And we don't know necessarily, but I think we actually do. So parents, teachers, administrators, and students can come together and really make the education system change dramatically.
And I think that we are going to have to address the elephant in the room and start having implicit bias and cultural sensitivity embedded into the core of how educators are funneled through colleges and universities. That has to be key, even to the school level, the district level. That has to be a training, because everybody always looks at the explicit things, the in-your-face things, but it's that implicit bias. It's those subconscious belief systems that funnel into how you approach teaching and learning, how you approach children of color, Black and brown, how you view who is smart, who is not, who is disabled, who is not. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, just to be honest, as a training specialist, when I'm running professional development and we're talking about these sensitive topics, I had a teacher break down and cry and say, I'm not racist. And I had to say, you know, no one is saying that. However, let's dissect this belief that just came out of your last sentence when you talked about student X. And in that, if we break that apart and dissect what you just said, what you're saying is you inherently believe that Black and brown children struggle and that their counterparts are smarter. Based on what you just said. So let's take it and dissect it apart and have an honest discussion. No judgment, but what people need to realize is our society, things we were raised with, believing in our families, it affects how we approach different students. It affects, am I going to challenge this student or am I going to go easy on them because I don't think they can do that? That's too challenging. And I have found in my coaching aspect of my career that that has been the issue. Why are we teaching, you know, third graders on a first grade level when Johnny is sitting there and the reason why he's throwing the crayons is because he's bored. He actually performs on a fifth grade level. So that implicit bias and those subconscious belief systems that certain groups are smarter than other groups and certain groups don't try to challenge them, they can't handle it, that is playing out too many times in the classroom.
To Bridget's point,
The disparity.
but I didn't want to, but let me stop.
I'm just gonna step in.
Alicia, you had a point, right?
Oh,
all right.
It cannot just be a professional development. You don't cure racism within a structure of white supremacy in a day, in 45 minutes, in an hour. It has to be continually ongoing. Like I came out of a school of education in undergrad. Everybody's not coming out of the same thing, and not to say anything's wrong with that, but in many of these institutions that, you know, teaching was not the person's first career choice, and those institutions that teach them pedagogy, that teach them classroom management, I don't believe in that word, that teach them, you know, how to interact with children, they teach them savior complexes, right? They teach them these implicit biases when they don't realize that they're teaching them that. These are the people who are in front of the children who look like us. That's just it is what it is, right? 80% of what it is as well, right? So even going back and looking at pedagogical practices that come from people of color, right? Often the holy grails of pedagogy that we refer to in the charter world is white, all white, not all white and all male, to be very honest, right? That has to do something to the psyche of educators who come into the classroom, regardless of who they're in front of, right? So even I've had to do a lot of unlearning in my educational career. My children have had to do a lot of unlearning, and it is an ongoing thing. It is not race and diversity training. Even going to educators of color, we talk about stuff other than race. We're good at other things that have to do with education, not just diversity, not just race. We're experts in literacy. We're experts in mathematics. We're experts in science. We're experts in arts. We're experts in all of these things. So even knowing sort of some material to read, knowing who to go to if you have questions about how to shake things up, because quite honestly, when we're speaking about going back into the classroom or going back onto Zoom or Google Hangout or whatever we're doing, the last thing I'm thinking about is what reading level the child is on. I need to know emotionally how that kid is doing. We need to get through some of that. I have children who have lost their parents. I have children who have lost their grandmothers and grandfathers, their uncles, their aunts, who watched their cousins die, who are now were just fine before the pandemic and eating, and now are starving, right? So we even need to understand that the social and piece comes before any of this other stuff, right? And I'm saying that as a mom. I'm concerned with, oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to stop you for a second. I know there's a delay, so you can't hear me when I initially speak. We're at 4:56. We're scheduled to wrap at 5 o'clock. We need to move to an open discussion, so we want to open it up so everybody who's on the webinar can engage in part of the conversation. But You all know that I said this before, we may go past 5 o'clock. Whoever's willing to stay on and wants to continue to talk, let's do that. We have a lot to say. We might have to do this 1 and 2 and 3 times. But one thing I want to say before we jump to the group discussion, I want to let people who are going to be involved in the group discussion, the basic sort of rules of engagement, if you will, right? Keep it respectful. People may have heard some things on the webinar already that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you feel a certain kind of way, that makes you feel attacked or whatever. Do not. What we want to do here on this conversation is talk about what people need to talk about, find solutions, let people be who they are. Again, respectfully, out of love, I'll say, and out of community, looking for improvement, empowerment. And that's what I ask that happens when we went to the open discussion. And again, I know we're running up against the 5 o'clock hour now, which we're supposed to wrap up at that point. If anybody wants to stay, whoever wants to stay on and continue discussion, please do. We'll keep it on as we did last time. If you do not, thank you for your time already. And we will see you next time. We may do this again. One thing I do want to say, though, so I'm going to ask Anna and Becky and let them know we're going to go to the open discussion now. But I do want to say to folks in terms of education, we have the privilege of working in the charter community. Education, right, is much larger than the charter community. Much of the problems as people understand them and the difficulty with education includes public education writ large, the traditional district schools as well. So when we talk about education and improvements and things, Natasha, you said something about like the divisions. I want to make sure that we're talking about education as a whole for all of our Black and brown students, wherever they are, whatever school they find themselves in, whether or not they are scholars who are excelling, who need that cultural connection, who are missing that, who are suffering from implicit and explicit bias and racism, or the students who find themselves struggling, who are trying to connect in a way that they cannot within the classroom. And so that we're talking about the improvement. I'm about the improvement as a whole. I'm here with the New York Charter School Association Executive Director. I'm absolutely here for charter schools, the kids who are there, but I'm also a mother, a parent, a Black woman, etc., and I'm about education for all. So the things that we are talking about improving, I want to make sure that we're talking about improving for everybody. That we want to make this classroom, we want to empower every child, wherever they sit. And I just want anybody to respond to that. Again, Anna and Becky, you'll let us know if we're ready for the open discussion, and we can pick up right where we left off, continue in the open discussion. I want to put some other ideas out there.
Yeah, folks are ready. And if I could just say, only in case there are people who have to ring off right at 5, we had a request in the Q&A for the panelists' email addresses. And so panelists, you have been hugely inspiring to me personally, but also to many of the folks who've been listening in. If you are willing to be contacted offline, if you could drop your email in the chat. Folks we've just made everyone participants, and so feel free to join by video, but unless you're speaking, please keep yourself on mute.
Okay, so I just wanted to wrap into that conversation and kind of add my last little piece of what I think that we need to meet the moment of the crisis. So 2 things that can be implemented quickly, and I don't think they cost a lot of money. One is adding to the curriculums of schools the voices and authors that are Black, brown, women, queer, all the things. But specifically, find time to. This means that yes, administrators will have to learn some new voices. And I'm also going to say something real simple. Please let TLAC not be the Bible. And for those of you who don't know what TLAC is, teach like a champion. I'm going to name it and claim it. It's not the Bible. It's not the Holy Grail. And it creates a very oppressive system for a lot of children and a lot of educators and a lot of administrators. I've seen them, and I'm not just talking Black and brown, I've seen great white administrators who were like, this is oppressive to my students. I don't like doing this anymore. And so I think that it's time for us as educators to make that decision when we can now drastically change the scope and sequence of schools. To let that book go. let it go. Or just, amend it, add to the literature. If letting it go is not your thing, add to it. The white fragility is great. Why are all the Black kids sitting at the lunch table? I can go, Chimamanda Adichie is a great. Sorry. I understand why you did that. Oh, but like adding to the literature that you're using as we are training our teachers and training ourselves as educators, and adding the voices of the other, Black, people of color, women, queer voices to what we are educating ourselves and what we're using in the classroom. I'm saying this from experience because I have taught everything from Billy Porter to James Baldwin to Angela Davis, Audre Lorde. I could keep going on. Elizabeth Acevedo. I take time to also, that's the second thing I was getting to it. Educate yourself on the culture of your students. Educate yourself on the culture of your community. It doesn't take you very much to stop saying that because my secretary is Latino and she's bilingual, oh, you're the translator for everyone. That's not her job. How about you hire someone whose specific position is translation within your school? Or start to recruit more people of the native tongue. Look for Afro-Caribbean teachers. Look for Afro-Latino and Hispanic teachers. Look for Korean American, Chinese American, Japanese American teachers. If you know that your school is presenting in a population of culture and there may be a language barrier, how about you hire not only, I know that's a part of the process, but it's not really happening on an equal enough playing ground to where there is enough of these staff members in schools that they're able to do their job as well as to bring the culture and the language across. And when you do things like that in communities of color, you are now honoring us and our culture. Don't knock kids for being too loud or Caribbean or Black or whatever. Whenever you say statements like that, as much as you want to say that you're not racist, that's a racist trope, microaggression or aggression as it is. Trying to, that's the third and my last thing, trying to shift someone's cultural identity and behavior to what you believe is mainstream or professional is at times and many times oppressive. If you think mainstream and this is how we've always done it and this is what makes it professional, take 2 seconds, stop yourself, ask yourself where I learned that from. Because if you can't specifically say where you learned it from, and if you only know that the behavior you're trying to change your children into is from what you learned from, it might be that you are perpetuating white supremacy, patriarchy, and oppressive behavior. So please, this is that funny thing about like disrupting the system. As we go back into schools, you need to, like I said, include more literature that is people of color, that is the other. 2, hire more people of the culture that you're actually working with. And third, finally, honor the culture of your students and the people that you work with and try and work within that. Those are 3 specific changes any administrator can easily start to evaluate the way that they see what they're doing. Empower us instead of trying to save us. There's a difference.
If I may. So I totally agree with everything that you just said. My work is informed by critical race theory, and 2 of the main tenets are, one is disrupting dominant narrative. So I think for us as educators, being able to push back against what counts as rigor, what counts as assessment, what counts as evaluation, right? And then one of the other tenets is this idea of centering the voices of marginalized people. So like you said earlier about making sure that we're including the voices of authors that look like our kids, but also including the voices of our kids themselves. So I center my students with everything that I do. So for example, if it's midterm, how do you want to show me how you what you know? Like what do you think you learned and how do you want to show me that? Like who am I to tell them, well, you know, it has to be this way. And I think especially now with our climate and what's going on, like our kids are going through both this racial and health-based pandemic, they feel out of control. Like they don't feel like they're in control of anything. So if we can give them the control to at least be a co-creator of their academic experience, I feel like it'll allow them to feel empowered and be more engaged.
So I want to hear from more teachers too on the question of 2 things. Again, emerging from this, you know, what can we change for the better in terms of how we do school? One of the things that I was saying to people who probably don't want to hear it is build more schools, right? It solves social distancing issues, and it also addresses that very precious smaller classroom sizes, right? And it puts people to work, right? Many of you might know my background is transportation. Building and construction is what makes a lot of sense to me, and this solves a couple of problems right now. But that's me. That's what I think. What else? What's out there that when all things come back to normal, when COVID cure is found, etc. What's school supposed to look like in your eyes? What can we fix? What can we change? What can we improve? What can we make better? I just want to hear from anybody who's still on the call.
Well, curriculum
and or response to what you've heard on the webinar.
Well, curriculum is going to have to change. We can no longer separate history, as Stefan has referred to several times. Black and brown history is American history. We cannot keep saying Christopher Columbus discovered America. He landed here on his way to India, and his directions were a little off. This land was already inhabited by the Native Americans. So we need to think about how we implement math, all of the different curriculums, reading, social studies. It has to be reformed. We need to have more infusion of internships. You know, a lot of internships start later on in their career, closer to college. Well, kids need to decide at earlier ages, you know, I have an affinity to this and that. I think the arts need a lot more recognition and play. Kids need to basically sculpt the path that they want to go on. And we also have to be honest in this country that all students are not going to go to college, not because they're not capable, but because that's not some people's interests. Okay. Some people want to get into trades. There is nothing wrong with being an electricianist. There is nothing wrong with being a plumber. They actually make more money than we do. And that's another thing to kind of piggyback for a second. If you want to get more people with expertise, more men, Black and brown men, you have to offer a salary that is worth them taking. The Economic Policy Institute did a report, and they compared teachers to people in other industries with similar skill sets. There's a 17% pay gap. Our income does not keep up with inflation, does not keep up with what's happening, does not keep up. I know more people that live with mom and dad. So if we want to attract a talent, if we want to see, you know, our kids take interest, we have to give them something that interests them. And traditional tracks of math and reading and science, it does not interest them as is. We have to totally overhaul the skills, the core skills based on tracks of learning. Do you want to be this? Do you want to be that? What do you want to do with your future? And bring in the local businesses, bring in the community organizations to partner with the schools so kids actually see this is what it looks like to be a vice president of a non-for-profit. This is what it actually looks like to be a mechanic. This is what it actually looks like if I want to be a lawyer, to be a lawyer. Whatever you want, honey, we should have a track to provide.
I think what you just said was essential though, because like I wasn't even aware of that 17% pay gap that Bridget brought up. But I think it's essential. And one of my life coaches, he always talks about this, right? He talks about like we need to start paying teachers like superstars and just stop requiring them to make the superstars, right? And like, because every person in our society has grew up with a teacher, whether they were homeschooled, whether they were taught in a public school, charter school, private school, no matter what it is. And we all have experiences in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know about you, but I know teachers who are graphic designers. I know teachers who are t-shirt designers. I know teachers who are coding experts. Like they can easily leave. I have one of my close friends She runs the coding department for our school. She can leave our school and go work for Google and make triple what she's making at our school, right? But the passion and desire to empower our kids keeps her there. And I think often, I just saw Crystal put in there in the chat, she said, you know, stop paying our teachers, paying us like we're doing community service. This is not a community service. This is an important, life-changing job. We have the ability to mold our kids, the next generation, in our hands. We can either build them or break them, right? And because we're committed to building and empowering and sending them off, that we need to make sure that this profession is, that we are compensated, because in a sense, I think that's a huge issue right now. People are just, we're being taken for granted. And the pandemic has revealed just how valuable we are. And I think this level of work, of what we're getting ready to, what we're embarking on, is causing for us to be not just creators, but we're even being innovators, right? And cultivators. We're cultivating new environments. We're innovating new ideas so that our educational system doesn't look like in 2020 like it did in 1856. It should not look the same. There's no other industry that looks identical to that it did. If the airline industry looked like it did in 1940 and 2020, I don't think any of us would be flying. If the car industry looked like it did in 1956 and 2020, I don't think any of us will be buying Fords, right? None of us. So why are we allowing our educational system to not change and develop? Why are we okay with that?
Can I offer?
Yes.
I want to offer just a
See,
couple.
the private schools offer the most promise there, though. So I'm going to sort of challenge everybody on here. So I came to the charter community, right? I'll say I came in September, and this is a world that I had not worked in before that, was not greatly exposed to in terms of certainly what I'm doing now. Charter schools, the charter law offers the opportunity for people to start a school. I'm going to challenge, especially my Black and brown educators on here, right? Anybody who are, and beyond. If there's a problem with the way education goes, where we been? 20 years.
Exactly.
Where we been?
Exactly.
What are we doing now in terms of education and innovation, right? What's the promise there that this offers? But I will tell you that it's under threat, right? Everybody on this call is happy about charters, love charters, but there are folks out there, and you know them well better than I do and longer than I do, right, who want to see this opportunity, this, I'll just say again, this golden opportunity in terms of being able to shape and mold a school, something that, particularly for Black folks, was denied. Don't come here. We will violently chase you out of here, keep you out of here. Now we have this tool. People want to shut it down. I'm outraged. I want to hear from other people about this. What of the idea of let's get rid of charter schools altogether? There's a threat. There's an existential threat to our ability to do all these things for our kids.
So I just want to.
The curriculum.
I just want to.
So I'm sorry.
No,
I
no,
hear you,
no.
brother Rafik. You about to say something? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to I want to co-sign on everything you're saying, and really invite, and if not implore you all to commit to starting a charter school. We need more Black and brown led charter schools, founded led charter schools, controlled by us, where we can actually construct the approach to learning and development that we want to see. It is right now, I think, the most powerful tool and the only tool for us to be able to, without having to go raise a whole bunch of extra other money from a lot of other people to start a private school, it gives us an opportunity to serve our people directly. And I would say, you know, look, at our school, there's a couple of things that we've come to learn are important things for us to make sure that our students have an opportunity to master: economics and neuroscience. The neuroscience, because we want our students to understand how their environment and their world affects them, and then what command through mindfulness they can exercise over that. And two, economics, because almost everything in our world is an economic transaction and economic set of decisions. How do we meet our needs and satisfy our wants? And we start teaching that, including game theory, starting in kindergarten, because it is just that important. How do we start to see our world in a way of resources so that we don't grow up learning that this is a zero-sum endeavor, that life in this world is zero-sum? It's not at all. And so I would invite us, just as Sister Yomika is suggesting, to start our own so that we can also be peers and participate. I mean, look, white-led charters aren't going anywhere, but they need more of us brothers and sisters to be in dialogue with them. And the more of us that are doing this work, doing that and lead our own enterprises, the more likely we're going to be able to really influence each other to be able to do and shift and evolve this work.
So I just wanted to jump in quickly just to say that, like, one of the things I could say about teaching in charter schools, because primarily I have taught between public and charter, but more so in charter in my years of education, that by working with the newest charter that I am now, based upon its original charter and vision, I was allowed the freedom to start exploring more voices and more literature that looks like my students and their culture. Like when I was brought on, the principal was like, so what books do you want to teach? Rather than like, just like, this is the curriculum, this is what you're given, this is what you're doing. And that is in many charter networks that are successful, air quotes, that successful being data points, successful being their graduation rates. But when I say successful based on like social and emotional like growth or development of the young people, not always. I think that it's not that we need to destroy charter schools, because I know someone, hint on this call that I hope speaks up, that is building a charter school of her own making, and I think that she will be amazing at creating this school. So I can't say disband them all, but what I do say is that we need to reevaluate what we are doing within them. So we have kept coming back to certain systems that we see in place, like the school to prison pipeline, which most people on this call know what that is, but what do we mean in practice in a school? There are certain schools within the city of New York where there are colored pieces of tape on the floor. Children are told to hold their hands at their side, keep their eyes forward. That's what a prison looks like. But that is also what an elementary school can look like. There are children that are told to sit for hours on end with their hands folded and feet flat on the floor and sitting up erect. And if they're not looking forward or slant or star or whatever crazy acronym you want to use, that doesn't work for children who may have ADHD. That doesn't work for a child. As Bridget said earlier, that I need something out of the box to teach me how to learn. And I realized when I used to work for one of the networks that like, they weren't seeing that in this child, and their only answer was, oh, this may not be the place for them. No, my love. School is always the place for a child. It is your job to educate children. If you say that because of the parameters you have created that you can't work with the child, what came first, the chicken or the egg? School was created because we decided that we wanted to socialize our young people and make sure that they would be prepared for later jobs and the workforce, right? Now, one of the things we have to realize is that the workforce is different. Children also know that. And I'm not just going to say children, I'm going to say young people, because there are millionaires that are 6 and 7 years old that got it real fast. They realized the power of social media, the power of Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, millionaires, YouTube, you name it. Kids with millions of followers all over the world that watch them from doing making music to doing makeup and things like that. How do we teach these young people? How do I teach them that writing a resume is important? How do I reach them? That is a part of it. And Bridget was right on the money that that's why I'm successful in my classroom. I can make, one of my projects once was like making a Facebook page for a character that we had read in the book, or making up a made-up Twitter conversation between two characters and then using it to display that. So I use social media in my classroom quite often in projects in order to teach literature, because I know that this is the new age. This is how they talk. This is how they actually make information. And if we're going to keep teaching Emily Dickinson as if she is the Holy Grail, or keep teaching William Shakespeare, who is racist and also probably didn't write all this stuff, then it's time for you to start teaching Stephon Guidry, because I write plays. I have a theater. I talk about the pedagogy of the oppressed with some of the things that I do. It's time for you to start teaching the Alicia Amber story and looking at her writing and what she's doing. It's time that you go to Tyreek and ask him, hey, what was the last paper you wrote on like how to actually diversify a classroom or a school? That's what you need. When you not only just lean on us because Don't lean on us as resources to be used. This is not that kind of transaction. Again, I'm coming back to the empowerment piece that we need to be in the room. I'm tired of seeing a glass ceiling. I am a Black young male educator, and I am a diamond in the rough. And it took me a while to start realizing that. When I realized that, wait, my kids always do well. My kids are always succeeding. But the problem I'm hitting is that because I don't do it the way that you told me to do it, that you have a problem with my approach. But my approach works because it's different than your system. And what we're realizing that is your system may be based on systematic oppression and just perpetuating it because it allows for mainstream power. It allows for a power system and structure that we're realizing cannot continue to exist. So if in this crisis we can do that,
I'm gonna
be at the shift.
So I'm gonna for a second. I wanna make sure we have an open discussion. We got almost 60 people on the call here. I want to hear from some folks who haven't said anything yet. I know you're out there. You have some comments. What of all this? What about, especially educators out there? What about your empowerment in your classroom? What about the ways that you are shaping what you teach, how you teach for your students, particularly students of color? And I'm just looking for someone to, anybody who hasn't said anything, who's been sitting on the sidelines waiting on the webinar, to weigh in.
Ms. Bennett, can I just ask this one question? I just want to ask this, and I know heard what you said. For Brother Rafiq, and I know you also said that you want us to we could create charter schools and create schools. I personally don't even know how to where to start with that. I have no clue where to start.
Brother, sisters, I do, and so do my other brothers and sisters in Black. In a collaborative, come see us. My email's in the chat. Sister Yamika knows how to get at me and the other members. We are here to help show you all the way. So if that's something you're thinking you don't know how to do it, we're here to help you do it. I'm sure, and there's a whole bunch of other people who are interested in doing that. So we got you.
Absolutely, and obviously the New York Charter School Association can certainly help you. I do want to take a moment and just do a little commercial for making sure you do your advocacy part, though. Charters won't be here if we don't fight for them, and I'm just going to say that plain and simple. Charters will not be here if we do not fight for them. So if there is going to be an opportunity for new charter schools to be started by charter schools, by educators of color, by people from the community, of the community who want to help the community, we have to first preserve the right to do that. And I'm sure that there are many people on this call who will be nodding their heads when I say, as soon as we enter the arena sometimes, or attempt to enter the arena, we find the doors are shut or the place is empty. That will happen if we do not advocate to keep these charter schools, to let people recognize and understand we are here. We are here. This affects us. We are here. We want to see this, and we want to take advantage of using this powerful tool to empower ourselves.
Also, Yamika, I gotta get ready.
Turn it back.
I gotta get ready to jump off, but I will say this. Yomika is right. When Yomika sends out the call to advocate for our schools, because we do have a cap, we can't even open up any more charter schools in New York City, right? There's a list of people that want to open up charter schools in the city, but can't because there's a cap in New York City, not in the state, but in the city. So we got to advocate. We can't just sit on the sidelines and just go to school and teach and do what we do. We love you and appreciate you, but there's a whole nother side of advocacy and going to Albany and here locally, knocking on people's, doors and visiting them and saying, hey, we got to lift this cap because we need more of our schools to open for our people because our babies, need to learn. So thank you, educators, for all that you do. Parents appreciate you and love you. Remember, we're your allies. We got your back. Just holler and let us know what you need because it's nobody going to fight like a parent's going to fight. So good night, everyone. Thank you, Yomika, so much for having this forum. I look forward to the next one. And we got to keep up the fight, y'all. Keep fighting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natasha. And we will do this again. So this has been powerful. I'm already getting the text, the comments. Listen, this is powerful. We would do this again. Obviously, this conversation can't be contained in 60 minutes, 90 minutes. We will do this again. Look for another webinar to follow this one up. We'll pick up this discussion. We'll run to 5:45. Give it about another 15 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. So let's continue the discussion, knowing that we'll shoot for that time. Uh-oh, did I shut it all down?
Ms. Bennett, they're asking you, will the recording be shared?
Reporting, it will be online, yes. So you'll be able to see this online. And it'll be on our website. We have if you go to newyorkcharters.net, nycharters.net, and you see webinars, you'll see this, the webinar with the date 8/6. So we're talking about, everybody right now is talking.
Oh, sorry. I will say that I always tell new educators to, be the teacher that you needed. I also believe in building the school that you would want your children to go to. I know for me, I would never send my child to a charter school because I just would not. And I can understand why many parents don't believe in charter schools and why they want to shut them down, because unfortunately, they perpetuate a lot of racist practices founded by a lot of people with implicit bias. So I get it as a parent, even though I do work at a charter school. I would definitely say—
I'm going to challenge you on that one. You work at a charter school. How could that be? How could that? You just said good.
That I would never. I would never send a
charter
kid to a New York charter school. The New York charter schools that I have seen from my child's age, I would not send them to. I would not send him to. I would send him to the school that I create, however.
Well, we should help you create that school, because I will say, well, I don't know how helpful my voice is in this moment, and I really haven't, it's been so powerful to listen. I send my white children to a charter school. I grew up in Maine, and I credit women like— all right, well, I credit women like Natasha and their hard work, and in my time at Uncommon Schools, that I can make this confession in front of 50 webinar participants on a webinar that's being recorded. I didn't know a person who wasn't white until I went to college. And yeah, that's a whole thing. And I have done a lot of work, and there is a lot of work for me to still do, but I live in upstate New York, and charter schools are the best opportunity for my kids to have a rigorous and as close to anti-racist education as there possibly is in the place that I live. And it's absolutely not perfect by any means, and it probably is very different for the children and families of color than for my children. And I acknowledge that, but I will also say, the alternative is for them to go to a profoundly more racist and less diverse district setting, and that doesn't feel better. So I think that's the beauty that I find in charters, is that every parent and every child's context is totally different, and if it weren't for charters, there would be no options at all.
I would just say that, like I said, I came from a different world, different perspective, right? In terms of, it was government, schools were schools. My kids are, my youngest is in college, and I live in upstate New York. And by the time one of my children would have needed another school, there were no charter schools for my child to go to, not here at that time and at that age. So I will say, though, that since September, as I visited schools across the state and sat down, walked through schools, talked to leaders, talked to teachers, talked to parents who in different forums, that there is, I am and will always be moved by the power and the promise of the ability to start a school. That is, as a Black woman, that's that's what we asked for. That's what we dreamed of. That's what we did when we weren't allowed, right, to go to other schools. That's right. That's a power that, you know, if education is something they can never take from us, quote unquote, right? The ability to start your own school is the magic that starts all of that. And that's something Ann and I had a conversation earlier today. I'll fight for that to the end. And I wish I'd been more aware of that 20 years ago in terms of the power and the ability to do that, and would have maybe had a different career, been fighting all the entire time to say, start schools, start schools, start schools, start schools, start schools. And that's what I hear when I'm out and about. I came from government and worked with a lot of elected officials, many of whom I had great relationships with. I come to the Charter Association and people say, oh my goodness, what are you doing there? How can you be involved with charter schools? Charter schools are awful, they're horrible, they're this, they take money, they take our kids, they take whatever. And I said, our kids are there. And charter schools have 80 to 90% enrollment of black and brown children, right? We're responsible for them there, right? We need to take care of them there. We need to take care of charter schools writ large. We don't need anybody to shut down the ability to have these schools, to operate these schools, to run these schools, right, to start these schools. Whatever the problems are, we need to fix, that our children are there and they have the opportunity to have a flexible curriculum, have teachers that look like them. And let me tell you, much like you, Alicia, I grew up in a predominantly white school district. Was an A student all the way, graduated from college, Phi Beta Kappa, 3.92 GPA, et cetera, graduated from high school a year early, all of it, the same thing. Oh my goodness, I can't believe you're bright and black. How'd that happen, right? All of that. And so education is incredibly important to me. And the idea, again, that you can be empowered to do this and that you can walk into a classroom and you can walk and you can see more than one teacher of color. In my lifetime, when I went to school, through my schooling, through high school, I only had teachers of color twice, and I don't mean 2 years, two days, and they were substitutes, and I remember them to this day because that was a miracle to me. So I just want to my focus on this, or not my focus, my thought on this is that we need to make sure that we use our tools. That the true, to me, empowerment is to use these tools to help ourselves, to help our children, to help make this the better anti-racist, society that we want to. But do not give this up. Do not destroy this. We know what exists without this, right? We're talking about the charter world, which when we step back, we're a small piece of this education puzzle and pie. That larger piece that's out there, that's the environment that created the charter school movement in the first place. That's the fight that existed before all of this ever even came about, right? That's the thing that we largely ignore. Why we're in the streets right now talking about housing and healthcare and police violence and not screaming at the same time about education, I don't understand. We have been suffering from this. We have been oppressed by this. We have been marginalized. We have been undereducated, miseducated, etc. in the educational system since its founding. It was not founded for black and brown people. We have been shoehorned into this situation, and whenever we are shoehorned in, anybody has been shoehorned in who wasn't invited in the original plan, what they get is something less complete, right? Something less real. You come in, you go to somebody's house for dinner. You weren't supposed to be there. You're going to sit at the corner with get the leftovers on the plate, and that's what you get. You ate, so you should be grateful for it, right? But you did not have the same experience as people who were invited in, expected to be there, and were welcome in the first place. And that's what the education system, in my mind, does to us. And we need to collectively do something about that, and I think that's why we're all here. That's why I'm having these webinars. That's why you're teachers. That's why you stay instead of going to get that 17% raise, right? Right? That's why you're here talking about the problems, because you want to solve them, because you know that there's promise if we get this right. Right? So I'm going to be quiet now and let somebody else speak.
I'm actually glad that we're here appreciating the charter world. Because I was in public school for about 5 years teaching, and it wasn't until I reached the charter world where it seems like charter schools can allocate resources however they see fit, right? And so I think, just for example, in our school, with the whole reopening because of COVID, we kind of tapped into our community, to all stakeholders, staff, students, parents, and because of that, our reopening looks a little bit different than the traditional public schools here in the city. And if we didn't have that freedom, I don't know, I would go in a little bit more worried, in the next few weeks. But it just has opened my eyes as to just, if that we can be, as a charter world, responsive to the community. We have that flexibility, and other schools may not. So I'm glad that we're sharing at least the love for charter here.
Anyone else? Let's talk about it. The good, bad, and the ugly. Let's talk about it.
This
We
is
can't fix
Daniela.
it if we can't claim it, right?
I just want to say that I have the pleasure of my work before the pandemic was visiting charter schools, on a weekly basis here in New York City. And I think there are some new schools that are created from a lot of educators that came sometimes from the networks and then work in some independent schools, and are really reinventing the model. And so I would really encourage all of you to look at Forte Prep, Brooklyn Rise, and really see, I think, some new schools. Apologies for my dog barking. Some new schools that are really, I think, changing the game, and I think are going to be the schools that we'll be talking in the future.
So Danielle is someone who can help people start charter schools, as well as Anna, folks at the association. I want to hear from anybody who would really seriously consider that. And if you're not considering it, what is it that makes you say, "Woo, wait a minute"? What makes you say, "Hold up"?
It's in the works, is what I will say. But I live in Jersey, so.
I would say that environment is everything. When you're trying to, in New York City, my name is Derek Westbrook. I'm in the Capital District. I'm not in New York City, where you can find a charter school everywhere. You're either in a place where there's a desert, like Schenectady, New York, where there are none and won't be any in the foreseeable future, or you're in Albany, where there are a plethora of schools there, but trying to start one in that environment, there's a lot of politics that you have to work through, and then you want a sustainable model, because you're trying to pull teachers who are certified into, you don't want to pull them into an uncertain future or something that can't be sustained, especially if you need time to build it. And without the support of networks that will help with the finer points, that's why I was happy that Rafiq was on the panel, because when you don't have that type of mentorship that other folks will give to folks who have an alternative, the TLAC model, we tried building excellent schools and all these other type of folks who will throw a lot of money and support behind folks who will replicate problematic systems, but will not really be open to looking at the systems that really address trauma-informed counseling, that deal with white supremacy, that deal with, when you say you want to have a culturally relevant pedagogy, that you say that you want to have a multicultural curriculum, that you say you want to have social justice initiatives, everybody starts backing up 10 paces and doesn't necessarily want to engage that. We will find the teachers who want to do it. A lot of them are in the city or other places, and trying to get them up to these places are difficult. Trying to get the community behind it is difficult. It sounds easy on the surface, but when you start to scratch back, pulling together resources, affording the curriculum to be able to build these systems is a little bit more of a challenge, and you need support to do that. And sometimes it is difficult to find.
So I'm gonna say that everybody has my contact information. You can always you can find me NewYorkCharter.net. At the bottom, my email was dropped in the chat. I want to say right now that we will help solve that problem. We will help make sure that if what I'm hearing is that there is a problem in the cultural, racial connection in terms of educators of color trying to start schools and the resources, the sort of the structure for creation, and it doesn't exist, we will build it. Tell me what you need. Let's work together. We will figure this out. And it may sound like rhetoric to you. I am absolutely serious. The only people who may on this line who may understand that I'm absolutely serious, Ashara, Anna, can I get can you, Daniela, let them know
Derek,
I'm absolutely serious.
I know of one bedbug crazy philanthropist in Albany who would love everything you just said. So anytime, email me.
So and please do not let this opportunity go unwasted. And at least if you don't believe me, try me, right? So reach out if you're serious about this. Say, I want to at least, even if you don't want to start the school, if you say, I want to help solve some of the problems and getting other people to start schools that are innovative, that in terms of what's not doing the replication of what already exists, that are culturally competent, and et cetera, et cetera. Let's do it. Come to me, talk to me, email me. Let's sit down. Let's talk about virtually, obviously, how to make that happen. How do we help build that structure so that can happen?
And I just want to chime in.
I challenge you all to do that, and I'm gonna say, don't just talk about it, be about it.
Yes, I'm going to chime in really quick because we actually, first of all, I'm new to the charter world, just like Yomika, and I've been in this game for a year now, and it feels like 10 years. But I've said this from day one. Any conference, any building I've gone into, I've always wondered, okay, where are the people of color? Where are the folks that I know these babies can identify with? And I've always prided myself on having one-off conversations with Black teachers, with, Black folks that are doing coaching. And I throw it out there. If you want to start a school, let's start a school. We just had one of our first Charter 101. If you want to start a charter, we had an informational in Rochester. So we have resources, we have relationships with both authorizers. It's at your feet. You just have to say yes and reach out, because I will definitely be a part of that, and I would help you with your board. I would help you with whatever resources that you think you're lacking, but it's out there. That's my piece.
And until the cap is lifted, Upstate's also a lovely place in the context of COVID concerns. That's my opportunistic plug. But New York City people, we can get there. We can get there.
That's right. I'm going to say this again. It's 5:44. We're going to end at 5:45, but we're going to end with a story that I like to tell. This is one of the first stories that I heard when I started here, and it moved me. It stayed with me. I repeat it as often as I can. I want to give a shout out to founders like Rafiq who believe in something, put their heart, soul, mind, sweat, tears, etc. behind it, and fight for it and do it and see it through. I am also inspired by a gentleman, Mr. Vasquez, who is in Rochester. And he, I'm going to paraphrase the story. I might not get 100% right, but I encourage you to reach out and let me get this right and let me make the introduction. The story is powerful. Essentially, he came to Rochester from Puerto Rico as a child. Wasn't done right by the school system, I'll say it that way, right? Marginalized, miseducated, largely based on the fact that he did not speak English, spoke Spanish, and was from not Rochester, right? Grew up, eventually went back to Puerto Rico, got a college degree, came back to Rochester, worked in Rochester. Along came the charter school law back in the early 2000s. And he said, and it still makes me chuckle when he said, when I could hear him saying this, he said, I didn't even know what it, he said, all I heard was that I could start a school. So I didn't even know how to do it, and I just knew that I was going to start a school. And he was starting a school to address and provide safe harbor and provide another model, another way of education, a way in, opportunity for students who were like him, who were marginalized because they were different, because they were Latino, because they're black or of color, et cetera, et cetera. He started a school. That school is still in operation in Rochester. The story to me is one of absolute empowerment, right? My grandmother would say, you can't find a way, make a way. That was him making a way. And that's what I encourage, and that's what I find in the beauty of charter schools and of this movement. And I think it's time that we see more leaders of color and school founders of color in New York State. And I think it's time for all of us to stand up, use our voices to support charter schools, to fight for this law to stay in existence, to let people know we want this and we're going to use it. And by the way, we need to use it. We need all the people on this call who were encouraged, who were motivated to get on this call, to stay on this call for an hour and 45 minutes, to take that, that goes, all of you who go into those classrooms, who teach the kids, who are social workers and parents and other parents and et cetera, and as well as your job as teachers, to take some of that energy and help found the school, help somebody else found the school, support the school, support what needs to happen for our children so we can empower ourselves in terms of education. Thank you. We will do this again. I hope you come back. I loved it. It was powerful. It was fired up. I'm sure we could do this for another hour. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you especially to our panelists, especially those who hung in there with us, Bridget, Stefan, Alicia, Arturo, Dr. Jones, Tyreek, who am I missing? If I'm missing anyone, I know that Natasha had to go. Thank you, Natasha. Shara, you're here. So you came. You stuck it out with us. Brother Rafiq, who had to jump off. Thank you all. I appreciated it. I look forward to the next one. Everybody who's on the webinar, please feel empowered. Please reach out. I think somebody asked for my contact information. I'm going to put that in the chat right now.
I also gave it out. I just gave it out.
Oh, there you go. All right. Okay. All right. Be safe. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.